Ooh, what's up guys, and welcome to the second part of 37 most famous checkmating patterns in chess. Now I'm gonna go through the remaining 19 checkmating patterns, and I will start with this one, which is called Reti's mate. Now this one was actually played by none other than Reti himself, and the checkmate goes this way. Queen d8 check. Now this looks like a free queen, but after king takes you go not bishop a5 but bishop g5 check. Discover check with the king and to the king with the bishop and the rook, so the king has to move. The only square is king c7, and now bishop d8 is a nice checkmate. Into the example. Try to pause the video and solve it. Now we see that the king here on c2 is similar to the example where the king was on c7, but now we cannot deliver checkmate here with the bishop because the knight blocks. How do we deflect this knight? Well, we check here on e1. Now the knight has to take. There are no escaping squares here for the king. So after knight takes, we deliver checkmate. The next one is called Pillsbury's mate, and it's simply checkmating with the rook and the bishop, while the rook is the one delivering checkmate. Into the example. Here in this example, we see that we have a strong bishop attacking the king. The rook is perfectly placed. Now we can make discoveries with the rook, but where should we move it? If you move it anywhere along the h file, let's say rook g3, then white will have f3, and white seems to be defending. Remember, white has an extra queen here in this position, so we have to find something stronger. Remember, the strongest check in chess is when you double check. Why? Because you force the king to move. If you check with like this with the bishop only, then white can block with a pawn or with a piece, or maybe can just move this pawn here to d5, and now black is losing. So we instead here play rook g1 check. The only move, because it's a double check, is with the king, and now we bring the second rook into the game, and now white has to give up his pieces, but still ends up in checkmate. The next mating pattern is Morphy's mate, and it's also with the rook and the bishop, but this time it's the bishop delivering checkmate. Into the example. This is actually a famous game. Maybe Morphy played it, I'm not sure, but I have seen it somewhere. It's white to move and win. You can pause the video. We can see here that we have a bishop and a rook that is ready to come to g4. It's similar to the example I showed you, but how can we do it? If we play rook g4 immediately, I mean, f6 is a move here, and it seems that black is holding. So we have to do it with tempo. Now, the winning move here is the insane queen f6. Now, white is threatening checkmate on g7, so I mean, let's say you take the rook, it's checkmate. So you have to act and take the queen. This is the only move. Now comes our checkmating pattern that we just showed. Rook check, king here, and it's a checkmate. Into the next one. We have here Greco's mate, and it's also with the bishop and the rook, but this time the king is checkmated on the edge of the board, not on g8. And we have rook h1 checkmate. Let's see the example. Again, try to pause the video and solve it. We see that the king here is cut on the g8 a2 diagonal, and if this pawn was not here, then we would be able to deliver checkmate with the rook here on h3. How do you get rid of this pawn? Well, we sack our queen. Queen takes on h7, king takes, rook h3, the queen has to block, and it's checkmate. The next checkmate we have is called the corner's mate. We can see why it's called the corner's mate, because the king is stuck on the corner. This time we have a rook and a knight, not a rook and a bishop, and it's checkmate with a knight. Let's see the example. We have here a similar position that I just showed, but with a bit more pieces. The rook is cutting the king. The knight is ready to deliver checkmate on f2, but there is a rook protecting this square. How do we get rid of the defender? Well, we sacrifice our queen. Queen takes on f1, sorry. The bishop has to take on f1, and now knight f2 is checkmate. The next one is the famous anesthesia's mate, and you will see this checkmate repeating in many of your games or many many games on the top level. This is a very famous checkmating pattern, and it's again with the knight and the rook, but it's the rook this time delivering checkmate. Look, the knight prevents the king to escape to g6 and g8, and the king here on is stuck because of its pawn, so it cannot move to g7. Into the example, try to solve it. I'll show the solution now. It's knight e7 check, king goes to h8, and remember the checkmate with the rook here? We sack our queen. And then after king takes, we checkmate on h3 with our rook. The next mate is also quite famous in chess, and it will repeat in many of your games. You have to know this one, and it's the Arabian mate. So the Arabian mate is also with the rook and the knight, and it's the rook delivering checkmate, and the knight is the one that is protecting the checkmating squares. So it's rook g8 checkmate. Now the example is quite a nice one. This is actually from a game played between two very strong grandmasters. It's white to move and win. Now, if you tell me that you want to play knight f6, it looks very logical actually. You're threatening checkmate here and checkmate on h7. I mean, how can you stop it? If black plays bishop g7, then you just take with any rook, and next is, it looks like checkmate. But actually, knight f7, f6 is a big blunder, because rook c1 is just checkmate. It's checkmate for black. So you have to move with tempo here. You have to be very careful and not get checkmated. The winning move here for white is rook h7 check. And after king takes, you check with the knight. The king has to go to the corner, and then you give checkmate on g8. The next checkmate pattern is called the Vukovic checkmate, and it's also with the knight and the rook, but this time we have a pawn supporting our rook. So this rook f7 checkmate. Instead of the pawn, you could sometimes see a bishop. So a bishop here could also do the job, and it's checkmate. So a bishop, a knight, and a rook, or a pawn, a knight, and a rook deliver checkmate here. This is a very nice example. Pause the video and try to solve it. It's white to move and win. So we have a pawn here, we have a knight, and we have a rook, but it's not exactly the same. How can we get this king here to f8 and then deliver checkmate? Well, we have, look, the knight is attacking h7 here. So we sack our bishop on g7, king takes, rook check. The only move is king back to f8, and then rook f7 is checkmate. The next pattern is called the hook checkmate. It's also with the knight, the pawn, and the rook, but this time the one protecting the checkmating square is the knight. So it's rook f8 checkmate. This also is quite a famous checkmating pattern. You will see it in many of your games. Remember, if let's say the king, even if the king is here on h7, so let's say this king is standing here on h7, then you could also, and let's see, say black has a pawn here on h6, so you could also checkmate here with the rook. So this is actually quite a common checkmating pattern. You have to know it. Let's see the example. Now we have a knight here, we have a pawn, we have a knight that could jump to g6. Remember when I told you that you could also checkmate when the king is on h7 and there is a pawn on h6? Well, this is the case here. How do we do it? Well, we sack our queen first. Now, we check first on h7. Now, if queen takes, then we just take the queen with the pawn, and let's say black plays anything, then it's a checkmate here, a back rank checkmate. So black has to move to h7, and now how do we get our rook here into the last rank and checkmate? Well, we sack our queen, and after king takes, we deliver checkmate. Now if the king goes to h7, h7 is checkmate, and if the king goes to f7, it's also checkmate. The next mating pattern is called the Anderson's mate, and it's when our pawns just suffocate the king and we checkmate with the rook, or maybe a queen as well in this case. Here we have a slightly difficult example. it's white to move and win. I really recommend that you pause the video and try to solve it. Now the solution here is queen takes on h7. Now the only move here is to take with the king, and now an important move, f6 check. Look, it's a discovered check with the bishop. Now if queen takes bishop, then we have the checkmate that we just saw, rook h3 and rook h8 checkmate. And if the king goes back, now if we play rook h3, then white can just move this rook maybe somewhere and just prolong his life. So we have to move with tempo here, and we play bishop h7. Now black has to take, and now we play rook h3 check. Look, our rook prevents the king to escape to g6. The king goes back, and rook h8 is checkmate. The next example I have for you is the diagonal corridor mate, and it's one of the very few checkmates where you can win the game with only one minor piece, and it's bishop checkmate. Here there is a very nice example. Pause the video and try to solve it. Now we can see that the king here is stuck, and a diagonal check would be deadly, but if we check right away, then g4 seems to save black a bit. So what do we do here? Well, we can play this move, rook h4. Now the king cannot take, the rook is defended, so after pawn takes, we simply have checkmate. The next example is called the bombarder's checkmate, and it's with two bishops this time, and it's just checkmating the black king in the corner of the board. Let's see the example. This is a very nice example. Try to pause the video and solve it. Now we see that our dark squared bishop is cutting the king, so the king actually has no squares. But how can we check? How can we do a bishop checkmate here? Well, let's imagine that these pawns did not exist here. These three pawns that I just marked. If we can check from g6, it will be checkmate. But how can we get rid of these pawns? Well, we first sack our rook. Rook takes on e6 check. And after pawn takes, now we sack the second heavy piece, queen g6 check, and after pawn takes, we have checkmate with the bishop. The next checkmate is called Boden's mate, and it's also with the two bishops, but this time it's not in the corner of the board, it's just on the last rank. It's bishop a6 checkmate. Let's see the example. This is similar to the one that I just showed you. The bishop is cutting the king, and we sack our queen on e6, and after pawn takes, we checkmate on g6. The next one is one of my favorite checkmating patterns. You have to know this definitely, and if you have to get it in one of your games. It's so flashy, it's so nice, and you know, when you just do it to your opponent, you just, I don't know, you crush them. I like when I crush my opponents. So we just checkmate with the knight. The king has no squares due to his pieces. Into the example. Try to solve it for yourselves. Now the solution is knight f7 check, king g8, knight h6. Now if the king goes to f8, then we have checkmate in one. So the king has to go to h8, and now we play this nice queen g8 check. Now the king can't take because the knight is defending, so after rook takes, knight f7 is checkmate. Now we have a checkmate with two knights this time, and it's knight f7 checkmate, so the knights take all the squares from the black king. Now we have a slightly difficult example here. We have two knights near the king. This knight cannot actually check on f7 because the rook can't take. It cannot check on g6 because the queen is guarding g6, is standing on g6. But we can see that if the king comes to h7, then when we check, let's just remove all of these arrows. If the king is on h7 here, if we check with the knight on f6, then we have a double check. And then we can checkmate on g6. So let me show you. King we play here first queen h7. We want to get the king to h7. And now after knight f6, it's double check. The knight cannot be taken, or the bishop either. King h8, and now knight g6. You don't win the queen here. It's not a fork. This is checkmate. The next example is the suffocation checkmate. This time we have two minor pieces, a knight and a bishop, and it's knight h6 checkmate. Into the example, white to move and win. And the winning move here is queen takes on g7. Now, after king takes, you play knight f5, double check. This is, guys, this is the power of the double check. The king has to move. When you double check your opponent's king, your opponent has to move their king. They cannot capture the piece. They cannot block with the piece. They cannot block with the pawn. They must move their king. And once they move their king, you checkmate on h6. Remember the bishop and the knight here. Give checkmate. Into the next example, we have now the collaboration checkmate. Again, the knight and the bishop, but this time it's the bishop giving the checkmate here. We have a nice example here. We see that the knight covers g8. The king here is stuck on the edge of the board. If we simply take bishop f3 here, it would be checkmate, but the knight is defended with the queen. So what do? Well, we deflect the queen. Which piece can deflect the queen? It's our queen, and we give queen here check. Now, if the knight moves, then we just take the queen. I mean, this is completely winning. It's checkmate in a couple of moves. And if the queen is taken, we have our collaboration checkmate. The next example is called Blackburn's mate. This time we do it with all of our minor pieces, or 3 of them. It's bishop e5 checkmate. So the two bishops deliver the kill here. And remember in the example where there was two bishops giving checkmate and there was a knight, there was a pawn on h7. Now it's our knight that controls h7. Let's see the example. This is this is quite a difficult example, I would say. I think it's from a real game, I'm not sure, but try to pause it and find the checkmate. Now remember the pattern I just showed you with the bishop here checking and then the knight being here on g4 and the other bishop checkmating on or like attacking h2. How do we do it? Well, we play queen takes knight. After pawn takes, we play bishop here check, and then after king g1, I mean, we don't have any checks anymore. If we sack our bishop, then we just lose it. I mean, if bishop takes, king takes, knight here, the king just moves, we lose. What do we do here? We play this silent killer, knight g4. Now, there are simply no moves here for white. I mean, yeah, regardless of what he does. Let's say h4. Bishop here taking on h2 is checkmate. This is a nice example. Into the last checkmating pattern we have today is called the David and Goliath checkmate. I would call it the pawn checkmate here, but David and Goliath checkmate is slightly more fancy, so use the fancy one. Into the example. Sorry, I've already shown the solution here, but we can see that the rook cuts the king, and we simply want to play f5 and checkmate, but our pawn is pinned. What do we do? Again, this is a repeating theme here in these checkmates. We deflect the defender, or the piece that is preventing us from giving the checkmate. How do we do it? We play queen d3 check. Now you have to take, I mean, if you play f5, it's checkmate here, so you have to take with the rook, and it's pawn checkmate. So that was all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this short series of most famous checkmating patterns in chess. I really recommend you to check the article written by Grandmaster Avitek Gregorian. Yeah, hope you learned something now, and hopefully now you can go and checkmate all of your friends in a savage way. Like the video if you like it. Dislike the video if you did not like the video. Write me a comment. What else? Yeah, subscribe to the channel. Okay, stay tuned and bye.